So one of the things, I got to talk with Chloe Cole today and interviewed her a bit about some of the stuff that she's experienced, but we talked about the medical community. And the medical community really abused her. I don't believe that they told her the truth, and I think that she would come to the same conclusion. They were using her, basically giving her false guidance, false hope, trying to scare her parents, because they looked upon Chloe as being, I believe, a source of income, a source of money. In your profession and what you do you see, because I would call that kind of integrity issues, do you see any type of integrity issues in your profession when it comes down to family courts and stuff like that?
Yeah, I would say that's very accurate. But in my profession, we base almost everything that we do on evidence-based practice, in which prior to making any interventions, there is good scientific research that's peer-reviewed that shows us what the potential outcomes are and what the potential risks are. And what I understand currently is that there is really no outcome studies for this type of area at all in terms of transitioning kids.
Right.
And I think that's one thing that's been exemplified with that interview as well.
Yeah. But the other thing is that, because I talked with another doctor here this weekend as well, and he talked about the peer-reviewed and peer-reviewed evidence or reports.
Peer-reviewed evidence, yeah.
Right. And the evidence shows, according to this other doctor that was here, he said, we can tell you what's going to happen to society when you tear apart families. And what I question at times is that what he said basically as a follow-up to that is that it's not good. We're going to see just catastrophic effects throughout society. And yet at the same time, we have a lot of people talking about the best interests of the children. The best interest of the child is to just accept your parents' divorce. The best interest of the child is to say that, I don't need to see my father very much, or I don't need to see my mother very much. And the best interest of the child could be, the state makes money off of your children, attorneys make money off of your children. Are there any integrity issues within your community with regard to if an attorney calls them to testify in a case that maybe the expert, the so-called expert, will perhaps, I want to say maybe adjust his or her testimony to suit the purposes of the attorney that's hiring?
Oh, I think it's very diplomatic what you're saying. I think we should just reframe it into frank lies.
Okay.
In my personal experience with one of the child custody evaluators, named Alissa, in her forensic report alone, her initial forensic report alone, I found evidence, I found, which I can prove by evidence, at least over 200 just frank lies in her report. And in those frank lies include fabrications. And then there were subsequent affidavits that had by themselves at least 50 separate lies in each of them. A total of over 300 separate lies in each of the writings that were produced by her. And there was resonance of the typical lobby group message, that the expanded standard is almost 50-50, or that there should be this type of co-parenting or that type of co-parenting, when actually what it is an infringement on First Amendment rights of speech or lack of speech, because it goes both ways.
Right.
So in terms of integrity, I've not only experienced that with this particular individual, but I've also experienced it with judges that are in Travis County. I mean, I can give you a good example. At one point, I appeared in front of a Judge Mousy, and we were assigned and wanted a parent coordinator. And there's a difference between a parent coordinator and a parent facilitator. A parent facilitator becomes essentially an agent of the court. They document the interactions of the parents, the interventions, and they report to the court. A parent coordinator actually is almost like a kind of a private coordination person, a private agent for the parents, and is not an agent of the court. And we had one assigned to us, and it was clear that this person advertised themselves as a parent facilitator on their website. It was clear that they advertised themselves as a parent facilitator on their emails, and it was clear that they weren't aware of the stipulations that were required by the family code of what they were supposed to do. But with Judge Mousy, because I rejected wanting this person who identified themselves as a parent facilitator, she said basically that I wasn't interested in having a parent coordinator coordinator, and I wasn't interested in resolving conflict when I was the one who wanted the parent coordinator in the first place. Subsequently, though, the good thing was this person wasn't assigned to our case.
Got it.
You know.
So this, let me make sure that I have this correct. The parent facilitator is an agent of the court.
A parent facilitator is an agent of the court.
Okay,
yes.
so in a situation when you have like a child custody evaluator, is she also considered an agent of the court or not?
She's also an agent of the court.
So, because 300 lies is a lot of lies for an agent of the court.
That's a lot of lies, yeah. And, you know, in terms of integrity, they can shape their lies however they want to, but the thing that I also experienced is that there's a certain amount of immunity that's offered to agents of the court. Not only judicial immunity offered to the judges in the course of their duties, but not only attorneys that are offered to in the course of their duties and advocating for their clients, but also to these these mental health agents of the court. And so they can get away with saying whatever they want to get away with, and then plead different types of immunities, such as 91A dismissals and TCPA, which is Texas Citizens Participation Act dismissals, and they'll be granted, particularly if there's already precedent that they're granted.
Got it, got it. And with regard to the 91A dismissal, didn't you write an affidavit recently for Cody Taylor?
I did.
With regard to LPC,
actually.
Erica Duckworth?
I did.
Now, would Erica Duckworth be considered a parent facilitator at the same time?
No. Now, some of this, I think we have to be a little careful because I'm only hearing this from the reports of Mr. Taylor, as well as watching the video yourself. But in general, what I can speak to is that whenever there's a private therapist involved, and it's a therapist for the child, that therapist has duty to the child. Now, the child is a minor, right? And so really also that therapist, that private mental health provider, has a duty to not only the child, but also to the parent, because the parent is the decision maker, the legal authorized representative. The child is only agreeing to whatever the recommendations are, and the agreement is for, or the duty is for the evaluation and treatment of whatever the presenting issues for the child.
Got it.
Okay, so they're an advocate.
Right.
Whenever you're a provider, whether it's a mental health provider or a medical provider, you're an advocate for the parent. You're an advocate for the patient. And then if it's a minor, you're an advocate for the minor once removed and also for the parent, so to speak. Okay. Now, that puts you at an automatic bias. There's a conflict of interest because you're an advocate for one party. Right. And if you cannot make neutral recommendations concerning custody because you're no longer neutral. Right. Okay. I mean, it's as plain as the blue sky is blue. Yeah. We all know this. Yeah. This is a standard. Yeah. So a private mental health provider that has a duty to one of the parties can't make neutral custody recommendations. Right. And to allow that to occur is collusion and enablement of just unethical behavior. Yeah. And what should the punishment for that be, your disciplinary action? Ultimately, it's ultimately up to the board that is licensing and regulating. And they're diligent in their job? No. Go ahead. As I've also discovered, unfortunately. But I think, Mr. Taylor's, from what I'm understanding, has realized they're not diligent in their job, and they didn't discipline this practitioner. Yeah. It's just something you don't do. There's no way you can. You can't be in a neutral position advocating for the child, making determinations about parental rights and parental care, custody, and control when you're already an advocate for one side. Yeah. How widespread is this? And I'm going to call it lack of integrity. I'll call it lack of integrity. It's a lack of integrity. How widespread is this lack of integrity in the family court arena? Can you speak to this issue at all? I can only speak to my experience. And in talking with others that have experienced the same thing, at least in the Travis County area, it apparently is frequent. Yeah. Yeah. And it's frequent with the same forensic custody evaluator. Yeah. And you can go online and you can Google her name and you'll find, multiple complaints. At least there were 20 separate complaints against her. With the most common thing is that there was non-support for the statements that were made in the reports.
Yeah.
which is supposed to occur.
Fabricated.
There
statements.
was lack of support of there was lack of provided evidence of the narrative, which is supposed to occur. In my case, what occurred also was that she had this narrative that was unfavorable, but the objective psychological test showed the opposite.
Yeah.
And she didn't include them in the psychological evaluation.
Very selective in her
Very
editing
selective, yeah.
of the facts.
Mhm.
Loosely
Right.
used
Right.
term.
Yeah.